Hey everyone, this will be the first video in a playlist of me going over all the files in this class practice set for the midterm review. So most of this is focused on object-oriented programming, though there's a couple other little things that I'll go over. So this video will just start out with this first practice question here, and then I'll make separate videos for each one of these as we go through them. Okay, so in this first one, the point of this is to remind you all on the difference between global and local variables. Just because on the coding section, especially, you will lose points, and your program actually might not even work correctly if you mix up global and local variables when you're making functions or methods. So let me come back to these. Let me just go over what this code is doing right here. We just have a simple class called soccer team that has their names, wins, losses, the goals they've scored. So this is like a simplified version of what you've done on one of your assignments. And then I just have this display summary info right here. So we are making two objects, and then home team is calling this display summary info that just displays the info that they've given it, right? So if I run this, it says team name, BYU, so it displays all the info that we provided into our object, right? So let's go back up to the first question here, and it says, is the display summary info method referencing only local variables, or does it reference global variables? So if we look into here, we see display summary info. We're getting self as a parameter. And the question asked us whether this is referencing global variables in here. Well, the way you can tell something is global is if you are referencing a variable that was not either created inside the function, like where it's indented from here, or referencing a parameter. So we have self, which is a parameter being passed in, which will include anything inside of it. So any of these variables would not count as a global variable. But anything else that we're referencing that wasn't created in there would be. So if we see here, we have home team, and home team was never passed in as a parameter, and it wasn't created here. So this actually would be a global variable. Total games played is a variable we are creating inside of this method, and then after we finish the method, its scope ends, so it's only local to this method. So that one's local, but home team is in fact a global variable. Okay. So you might think, well, what's kind of the big deal with that, right? Like, is this to question 3, like, right? Why is referencing a global variable inside a function or method bad? Well, you might just run this and say, hey, this works, why does it matter? The big problem will be, for example, when we're using methods like this, what if I try and run away team.display summary info? Well, the away team is U of U with different scores, right? But it's still printing out BYU as the team name, right? That's because display summary info is referencing a global variable, home team, down here. So it doesn't matter what object actually calls it, we're getting the wrong info. What we want to do instead is make sure, in fact, I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to hold function key and then do F2. I'm going to change this to be self, actually. And it changed this one too. So I'm going to change that back to home team. So now we're referencing self, and we're no longer referencing a global variable. So that way, when I run this piece of code here, and we're at display summary info, if I step into this function and come up to here, self is referencing whatever object called it. So in this case, the away team, which is U of U. Okay. So I get the wins, losses, the name, total games played, goals scored, goals allowed, all of that stuff from the actual object that called it. So I'm now printing out the correct piece of information. And it'll work no matter which object I throw into there. That works for the BYU team or the U of U team. Okay, so that's one reason, especially when we're working with object-oriented programming, why you should never reference an object that you create at the global scope inside of a method. You always want to reference things locally with either variables you create inside or through self. That's the main idea of this. So hopefully that clears up why that's so important and why you can really mess yourself up if you don't rely on self here. And yeah, you can just message me if you have any questions about that, why that's so important. So thank you. We'll jump ahead in a new video to go over some error handling.